Begin the current Daf Mesechta Bava Metzia Daf Tezvav. Begin 11 lines down at the top of the Amud, where the Gemara continues. We're really finishing up a conversation with the previous Daf. We had a teaching. We had a machlokes. If someone sells a field to his friend, and it turns out it's not his; it was stolen. So we had a machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Rav said, "Okay, he gets his money back, obviously, and he'll even get the shvach too." Shmuel said that no, he'll get his money back, but he won't get the shvach. The Gemara ultimately explained from Rav Nachman that the reason why Shmuel holds like this, he won't get the shvach, is because even though the guy owes it to him, but it's merzi kiribis, because ultimately it turns out it really wasn't a sale; it was really stolen. So he can't say it's not his. If you're going to give him, if the guy who got the money, the seller, is going to give him back more money than he gave him, so that's merzi kiribis because he got money and he's giving him back more than what he got. So therefore, that's problematic. The last thing we had said, the Gemara tried to bring a raya from a brisa that was explaining the case of our Mishnah of Lachilas Peres Ketzad, and the difficulty of the brisa seemed to indicate a case of when someone's guzzle sudden mechavera machul achavish bicha, and that the guy, the buyer is going to be able to get his money back from the seller, at least from bnei chayren, and whoa, that contradicts Shmuel. I thought you can't get shvach because of mechzi kiribis. There's three answers the Gemara gave, and our Gemara is just finishing that up about like, okay, according to two of the opinions, we have the following question based on how they're interpreting the brisa to Miyash Shmuel. Throughout the entire world. So we're discussing today's daf are shvach, which is when a buyer buys a field and then he increases the value of that field, and then someone comes and is teirefit from him, whether it be a bal chayv, a creditor, or a nigzel. What's the halacha? And specifically, do we differentiate in different types of shvach, like shvach megil, like kesvayim, that if, let's say, he increased the benefit of it, it's already ready to cut that benefit and put on your shoulders, would that have a different halachic status than regular shvach? The halacha b'poitiki, which is that when it's not just a regular creditor, the creditor was told, this is where you're going to collect a poite, this is where you're going to collect from. So then he's actually on some level considered like the owner, and therefore when the guy, the lekech, was doing work and it was actually saying, well, you're working on my field, that I don't owe you what you did to my field. Halacha of ribis, the Gemara introduces, of the prohibition, obviously, of lending money and getting more back than what you gave, and that is problematic even by sub b'sa. Say, hey, you give me a sub wheat, I'll give you back a sub wheat. That's problematic too, because the value might have gone up in the meantime, and then that would be considered as ribis. The halacha that zvini, that however by a sale, although you could run into similar problems, but we were not as stringent for laws of ribis when it comes to a sale. The Gemara has a machlokes regarding if, let's say, you recognize that this was not this guy's field, and you, so to speak, bought it from him anyway. What's the halacha over there? What do we say the status of that money is? Is it a pekadon? Is it a matana? What were you giving the guy the money for? And then the Gemara ends up with Chazal. If, let's say, the guy who stole the field sold it to someone else, and then he goes and buys it back really from the real owner, what was he trying to do? What becomes now? Does it become his because he's now like a new lekeach, or is he buying it so that what he had sold originally should be substantiated? So begin the current daf. Begin on 11 lines down on the top of the Amud on Tezvav Med Aleph. We are really just finishing up a conversation from the previous daf, which we had mentioned this teaching of Shmuel of the halacha of if someone sells a field to his friend, turns out it's not his. Shmuel had said, okay, look, he could get his money back, but shvach ein lai because it's mechzi kiribis. It looks like schar ma'isa by It looks like he's taking wages for his thing. And then we had a brisa, which was on the bottom of the Yadalam Beis. We had said Toshema Lachilas Peis Ketzad. Someone steals a field from his friend, and it's Yotem Tachas Yadai. Kishu Gaiv. It was a difficult brisa to read. When he collects, who's he? He collects the keren from the Chazm Shabbatim, and the peiros is given the Chazm Nechayrin. So the Gemara said, obviously you can't read it as it is, because if it's only that it was a Gazan, who's the Gazan collecting from? So the Gemara assumed it's guy who stole the field from his friend, sold it to someone else, the guy made it better, now the nigz is coming to collect it from him, and now the lekech goes and collects the shvach that was taken from him, and he collects that from the guy who sold it to him, the Gazan. Now that contradicts Shmuel, so the Gemara had three answers. There was Rabba's answer. He said, no, we're talking about where the guy stole it from his friend, and he ate the peiros, meaning there was pears and he ate the pears, and he dug by Reshichet Ma'aris. So there is, so when the Nigzal is coming to collect, that's what we're saying. The principle he could collect from the Chasam Mishabadim, but the pears which were on there when he sold it, that he could only collect from the Chasam Necharen. That was one approach. Rabbi Apuna said another approach, for example, where there were masikin, there was these mobsters that took it away, and now when the victim comes to collect the keren, he can collect from the Chasam Mishabadim. But if he's coming to collect pears, he's coming to collect b'nei charetz. So what's the difference? What it sounds like the same type of case. The question is how you translate Yetzim Mitachas Yodai. There was a third approach of Ashi who said, let's start thinking it's actually two. It's a lekech and a nigzel. For example, a guy stole a field from his friend, full of pears. He ate the pears and sold the field. The lekech is coming to collect the only principle. He collects the Chasam Mishabadim. The nigzel is coming to collect the pears. He collects the Chasam Necharen. That's what we're up to right now. So says the Gemara, Ben l'Rav, Ben l'Rav bar Avhuna. According to both of them, that they explain the Braisa that when we're talking about the collection of the principle from the Gazlan, it's talking about the Nigzel, the original owner, as we had explained. So the question is, Milva Pehu. This is an oral loan because there was never documented this, what the Gazlan owes the Nigzel. It's something that he owes him because he stole it. How could it be that the Nigzel, you had interpreted, again, this was all to resolve Shmuel in his teaching, that it shouldn't contradict him regarding the halacha of collecting the shvach from the moicher. So he said, yeah, it's a different case, not lekeach collecting from the shvach from the moicher. It's talking about the Nigzel. He's collecting, which obviously, okay, that makes sense, a very different halacha. Problem is, but now that interpretation is difficult because a nigzal is not, no one had a shtar written, so he obviously owes him the money, but how could he collect that, what he owes him from what he sold off, the Gazlan sold off somewhere else? Those buyers were not aware of any theft. It wasn't written in the document, so it's like oral loan, you can't collect from the Chasam Mishabadim. So it says, what we're talking about is before this Gazlan sold some of his assets, he had already gone to court having stolen from this Nigzel. Oh, once the courts prosecute him, the word gets out. It's like a milva b'shtar, because that's the whole point of a milva b'shtar, that people find out about it. So people knew. So therefore, yes, any lukuchas that were afterwards, the Nigzel is going to be able to collect from. Because he first had a court case for Hadar and only then did he sell it to the lukuchas. So if that's the case, Peres Nami. Then wait a second, then even the payers, why you tell me the payers coming like B'chaz Nechayrin, that if you had a court case already and the guy had sold them, the guy stole a field full with payers and he ate the payers and he ruined the karka, which was the first answer. There was three answers. The first two, which were the ones we're asking on, is like, so he ruined the karka. So there's keren and payers he has to collect. So why can't they collect the payers also from the Chasam Mishabadim? Says the Gemara, the court case had only been on the principle, but had not been on the payers. The Gemara says, my paska. In other words, the Tan is slicing up and saying that the court case is only on the keren and not on the payers. Like, why would you say such interesting spell? So the Gemara says, yes, the general thing is kitava inish, where the person makes a claim, karnatav bereisha, first claims the principle, and then only would he claim for the payers, and therefore it's very likely that was the case, and therefore that's why only the keren could he collect from the Chasam Mishabadim. Now the Gemara goes back to the previous daf and asks on the halach of Shmuel again. B'sava Shmuel, really the Shmuel hold the kech megazlan, that when the person buys from a gazlan, leslie shivcha, he does not get the shvach, like we explained, because ultimately it was really never a sale, because he stole it, and you can't sell what's not yours. So we said that Shmuel holds, the way Rav Nachman explained them, you don't get the shvach, you can't get reimbursed for his improvements, because again, since it was really no karka, it was really like so to speak a loan, and now if he's going to get back from the shvach, it's like interest, because he paid the seller $1,000. Now the seller's giving him back not $1,000, because this guy improved the field $500, we're giving him back $1,500. That looks like ribbis. Says the Gemara, did Shmuel really say this halacha? But we have a contradiction from a different opinion of Shmuel. Shmuel Rav Chinna bar Shilas. Rav Chinna bar Shilas was a sefer, was a scribe. So he told him that when you are writing a document, imlich, consult with the seller if he's going to accept upon himself to allow the buyer to collect, and b'chasav, only then should you write the following things. Shufra, which is from the best of his assets, which refers to the principal, and shivcha, if the guy made improvements, and uperi, and even the fruits. You have to ask him first if he's going to allow that to be collected from him. If it gets taken away from the buyer, that he can then go collect that from the seller who's insuring that. Now, what would be the case that the buyer would have to go back and collect from the seller? If it's a creditor of the seller who has a lien on the guy's properties, and now you bought it from him, now he's going to go collect from him. Well, mi isle peri? Does the Baal Chayv collect the peiris of the buyer to then say that you have to consult with the seller, that when he's taking responsibility for the buyer, even for peiris, why does he have to take responsibility? His creditor can't even collect peiris from the buyer. There's three people. There's a Baal Chayv, there's a seller, and there's a buyer. Baal Chayv of the seller comes to the buyer of the seller. And he says, hey, look, the guy who sold you the field owes me money from before you bought the field. He can't afford it. I have a lien on this property. I'm going to collect it. So when Shmuel said to Reb Chaim Bashilas, make sure the seller is willing to accept responsibility for three things, and one of them is payers, it can't be talking about that the guy who's collecting from the buyer is a Baal Chayv, because of Amar Shmuel. There's a different teaching of Shmuel that we mentioned in the previous daf. Baal Chayv gave us a shavach. The creditor, when he's collecting from his borrower's buyer, the guy who owes him money, who doesn't have anything to pay, bought from that guy a property, so he could collect from that guy, when he's collecting his lien on the property, even the improvements the guy made. But the diuk is shvach in. Yes, the improvements, yes, of a Paris life. But it cannot, Paris is more than just improvement. It's something, a derivative of that thing that he can't collect. So if Shmuel was telling Chaim Bashilas to consult regarding payri, it must not be that the one who's going to take it away and snatch it from the buyer is a Baal Chayv, because Baal Chayv doesn't get Paris. Elav, rather, must be Toma, but the Keich Megazlan must be, what is the seller saying? In case I'm a Gazlan, I'm taking responsibility that even the payri, which is going to be collected from the Nigzal, don't worry, I'll take care of it, I'll cover you. Wait a second. Shmuel said, forget about payri. Shmuel said, when you buy from a Gazlan, you don't get shvach, because that's mechzik ribis. So how are you telling me that you'll compensate not even shvach, but even payri? This case doesn't work out. Doesn't make sense Baal Chayv, and definitely doesn't make sense regarding Lekeich Megazlan. So Rabbi Yisrael says, not a difficulty. He says, what are we talking about over here? Kagoyin sheyesh lekarka. Talking about where this Gazlan has property where he's paying back to the guy who bought from him property and not money. Oh, now it doesn't look like ribbis. Ribbis is you give a guy $10, you get back $15. Here, he's not giving him back. He's not giving him back anything of money. He's giving him back a piece of property, and therefore it doesn't resemble ribbis. I was going to ask him that in a second, but it at least doesn't resemble. Remember, the whole shaila is really, it's not really a ribbis shaila. It's not really ribbis. It's mechzik ribbis. He's not paying it back more for interest on the loan. He's just giving it back for the shvach that he had made. But it would look like ribbis, but since he's paying it back with karka, not with money, so there's no problem. It doesn't look like ribbis. On that, Abai still asks on that. He says, but I'll ask you even a more basic question. You think you're allowed to borrow when it's not money, when you're not paying back money? Guy, one wife says, hey, you have flour? Yeah, give me a 5-pound bag of flour. I'll give you back a 5-pound bag of flour. You think it's permitted to do that? When you have property? There's halacha that the Gemara discusses later on, Daf Yomi and Aleph, that you're not allowed to borrow a saw for a saw. Why? Because the price of wheat might go up. When you're paying back the wheat, instead of being $6 the bag, it's going to be $7.58. You're giving back more than what you got. That's ribbis. So the Gemara is saying, who cares he has karka? That doesn't allow a pound about ribbis. The Gemara says, yeah. Amalei says, but hasam halva. There it's talking about by a loan. The wife borrowed the flour, and you're giving back flour. There's more applicable ribis by a loan than by a sale. Hachazvini, here it's a quote unquote a sale. It wasn't really a sale because the guy really stole, but it's a sale, and therefore that's why, since he's giving back karka, we're not concerned about this problem about mechzik ribis. Ikidami, that's one approach. Those who say a second approach, Amar B'Yisvi says, where the witnesses went and made a kinyan from him at the time of the sale. As some Gemaras bring that chakanu, meaning the Edom used to do the kinyan for the buyer. We find that many different places. But meaning, they already made a kinyan on the shvach, where that means to say that it was really obligated at the time of the sale, before there was this profit of the waiting of the money, which is a problem usually for riba. So if the seller performed the kinyan at the time of the sale, committed to pay for the shvach of the property seized, it doesn't resemble ribas, because ribas is, okay, by the fact that you let me have this money for 5 weeks, which is what a loan is, I'm going to give you back, instead of the $5 you lent me, $6. But here, that's not what you're talking about. Here, they're making a kinyan on it right away, so therefore, that's why the shvach does not have a problem about mechzik ribis. I mean, Shmuel's halacha is correct. It generally is a problem with mechzik ribis. But here, it's not a problem because they made a kinyan right away. Somebody Abai asked the same question. How does that help? You think if you make a kinyan right away, you're allowed to go ahead and borrow a flour and give back the same flour? That's going to be a problem by ribis. He says hasam alva. That's different. When there's an actual loan, then we are more stringent and we wouldn't allow it, even though you can do a kinyan right away. But here it's a sale, and therefore it's only like a mechzik ribis for that. Yeah, it's enough that we go ahead and do a kinyan right away. So the Gemara goes back now, Gufa, to discuss this teaching of Amar Shmuel, which we mentioned in passing, that Baal Chayiv gave us a shevach. We mentioned in the previous stuff also that a creditor, when he's collecting, so he comes to the guy who owes him money, and the guy says, Enli. He says, Enli, when I lent you money, you had assets. What happened? He says, I sold it. He says, okay, I had a lien on the property, I'm going to go to the one who bought from you. So he goes to the guy, he says, hey, buddy, get off this field. This is mine. So not only does he take the property, he even takes the improvements that the buyer had made to the field. So Rav says, Teda, you should know that he collects it and that the buyer can't say, what do you mean? But I improved the field. How are you just taking it? Because this is exactly what the seller writes to the buyer when he makes an insurance on the deed, on the document of the sale. He writes like this. Ano Akim says, I am going to guarantee the ashpe, and I'm going to silence the adke, and I'm going to purify from all types of contesting. V'amorik, and I'm going to cleanse zvina ilin, this sale. Inun, them, v'amaleyan, and their expenses, v'shivcheihen, and their improvements. V'ekim kadamach, and I'm going to stand it up in front of you. And it says in the document, v'tzavei zavina danan, that this buyer wanted, v'kabal aloy, and accepted upon himself this contract. Now, since the buyer is going to go to the seller and collect the shvach, so therefore the bachayv, the creditor, could collect the shvach from the lekech, because then the lekech is going to go back and collect from the meicher. The fact that we see that the meicher is guaranteeing to the seller, to the buyer, that if need be he'll compensate him for the shvach, obviously that means to say that the bachayv is kaina, is able to be given the shvach. On this, the Gemara has the following question. Amalei Rav Chia bar Oven l'Ravi says, wait a second. If that's the case, matana. So when you guys giving a gift to someone, they're like sibli hachi. It doesn't write like this because a person does not accept insurance for what he's gifting. So Chanami, are you going to tell me that if, let's say, he gives his assets to someone else as a gift, that the creditor is not going to be able to collect the shvach because that recipient is not going to be able to go and collect that what he invested from the giver, the one that gave it to him? Because you don't have the svara anymore that Rabbi was saying. So Amalei, he says, yes, exactly. You won't be able to collect that shvach from the recipient of that gift. So he said, do you think that the power of a gift is stronger than that of a sale? Amalei, yes, yafa, it's better, and it's better in this regard. because since ultimately he's not going to be able to collect it, so we're not going to cause him a loss for something that's not a loss for the creditor. Because I understand the property itself, so you could say, why'd you take it? Where am I going to collect my debt? I had a lien on the property. But regarding the shvach, you can tell him, what am I causing you a loss? I made it better. You don't deserve these benefits that I made. And therefore, for regarding that, the Bachayv would not be able to collect that from the Lekech, from the, actually not Lekech, from the Bekabel Matana. Now, Amr Rav Nachman, he says, Hamasnita Misayele Lamar Shmuel. He says, we have a brisa that supports Shmuel that a Bachayv is Geiva de Shvach, but V'huna Chavrin, our colleague Huna, Mukim lo b'mila achrini, he explains it regarding something else, and he takes away the proof of it. The time like learn the brisa, if someone sells a field to his friend, and then the land was seized by a creditor. So kishu goiva. So now when the buyer goes back to collect from the seller, says, "Hey, I bought this field from you. It was taken away from me." So goiva has a kedem in the chasam mishabadim. So the principle itself that he collects from his seller's collateral, which obviously anyone that bought after him, just like he got it seized from the creditor because he bought after the guy's loan. So whoever bought after him, he seized from them. And the shvach goiv mechasam b'nei chayrin. And this is the point. The shvach is collected from the available assets. So obviously we're talking about, as we're describing, that it was taken by a Baal Chayv, because, like we said, that by a Gazlan, you don't even collect the shvach. So one thing is that you see support for this teaching of Shmuel that a Baal Chayv is geiva the shvach. That's why the lekech is coming to collect the shvach. So you can't collect it from the guys the chaz b'shabbat, but you collect it from the chaz and the charon. So you see a raya that a b'chayiv is good with the shvach. But Huna Chavrin Mukim lo b'mila achrini. Our colleague Huna explained it talking about something else. He explained it b'lekech megasel, where the guy who bought it from a guy who stole it. Where a nigzel for sure collects the shvach, because he says, wait a second, it's my field. This guy who sold you, it wasn't his field to sell. You made my field better. But a chayiv, as long as he didn't seize it yet, it's not his. It's in the possession of the lekech that he made it better. So therefore, that's why maybe the chayiv cannot collect the shvach. So Rav Huna takes away the raya by explaining it to lekech migaz. The Gemara continues, which relates back to the teaching we're discussing. Right. Why doesn't he hold like this by Oh, so Rashi had explained that on the previous daf. He said that by this was like on the first wide lines on the previous amud. He had said that to explain why Baal Chayv is different. He says by a Gazlan, it was really always alone. He says by a Baal Chayv, it's not really that case. It's really more like buying it back now. Meaning, if he would go ahead and pay up his Baal Chayv, so he would be able to. The Baal Chayv would have no rights to the field. A nigzel, it's his field. A Baal Chayv, it's not his field. If the guy who sold it to him would pay up his creditor, the guy who bought from him would be able to hold on to it. So when he's not, and the creditor's come to take it, so and now he's paying him back. It's like basically like buying back from him, because it really was his field. He sold it, and now so it's not like a mechzik ribis, because it's really like a sale, versus the case of the nigzel. Now the Gemara continues that will relate back. Tanya Yidach learned another brisa. If someone sells the field to his friend, and he makes improvements to it, and the creditor comes and seizes the property. So, when the buyer collects, it depends. If the improvements he made are more valuable than the expenses that he spent on improving it, so the buyer takes as a shavach the improvements mibala karka from the owner of the property, more than what was the expenses, because he says look, I paid up your debt to the creditor, so give me those the value of that improvement. But Yitzim B'chayv, which that's always like the case. The expenses you collect even no matter whose field you improve. So the creditor himself, he has to pay for the expenses, not for the improvements. But the improvements he'll collect from the owner of the field who sold it to him. Now, Vima Yitzir Yisir al Shvach, if the expenses are more than the profits, more than what he made it better, so Ein Loi, so the buyer only gets Elahitza, only what he had spent, that he gets paid up, only according to Shir Shvach Mibal Chayv. Meaning the rest he's going to lose because no one's getting any value of that. He spent $10,000 to make his field better, and his field went up to $2,000. So he'll get compensated for the expenses only according to whatever the improvement was in the field. That he's going to collect that from the Baal Chayv, like we said, because the Baal Chayv has to pay for the expenses, but not more than what the actual improvement was. If the improvement was more than the expenses, then the Baal Chayv pays for expenses, and the difference of the shvach, which the creditor is getting, to the one who sold him the field, he says, "Look, I paid up your creditor. With that, pay me back for that shvach." Says the Gemara now, "V'ha Shmuel b'may mokim la." How is Shmuel going to explain this brisa? There's two different ways that's possible he explains it. Because iblikech megazlan, if it's talking about where the guy bought the field, the guy who sold to him was a gazlan, and when we say that this Baal Chayv, quote unquote, collected it from him, seized it from him, it means that he wasn't really Baal Chayv, he was a nigzal. So kasher reisha. So the reisha is difficult because the reisha said that he takes the shvach from the Baal HaKarka, meaning when the shvach was more than the expenses. So he said, oh, then he's going to collect that from the owner of the property. The expense will get from the Baal Chayv, but the difference of the shvach will get from the Baal Karka. But the Amar Shmuel said, "Lokech megazlan, when you buy from a gazlan, leslie shivcha, you can't collect the shvach. So how are you saying that you're going to get the neitlas shvach from the Baal Karka? Every time it's talking about a gazlan, you can't collect that from the Baal Karka. And even Baal Chayv, even if you tell me it's talking about a creditor, kasher reisha v'seifa, then the reisha and the seifa is difficult because you said that the Baal Chayv, the creditor has to pay for the expenses. So if the shvach is more than the expenses, you said, okay, he'll pay for the expenses, and the shvach will be from the Baal Karka. If the expenses were more than the shvach, we said, okay, he'll have to pay the expense only according to whatever shvach there is. But upon him, you told me the Baal Chayv has to give the expenses. Wait a second, but Shmuel said, Baal Chayv gave us a shavach. You told me that the creditor collects the shavach, and he doesn't have to give anything. Why are you forcing him to pay for the expenses when you told me that he gets to collect the improvements? So either way, this price is difficult on Shmuel. Either whichever one to explain, either by Gazlan or Baal Chayv, they both seem to be difficult. So the Gemara says no. There's actually two approaches. If you want to get able to kech megazlan, that we're talking about where he bought from a Gazlan, and we're talking about kagun sheyesh le karka. We're talking about where the seller has property, or where they pre-committed to this obligation. So like we said before, that would be an exception to Shmuel's rule. We said, although generally in the Gazlan, and this Bryce is saying, wait, he's collecting shvach. I thought you told me you can't collect shvach because mersi kedibis. But we said before in our Gemara, previously we said that Shmuel holds that no, in these cases, since it's not a loan, it's like a sale, although technically it's really not a sale because really the guy stole and really it's not. But Lamaisa went through the medium of a sale. Then, since it's property, or if there's a kinyan miyadai, so then since he's not giving back actual money, or because there was a kinyan, so that's not really such a mechzik ribis, and therefore it's going to be permitted. That's one approach. But it's talking about by a creditor, like kasha, and it's not difficult. Which we had a difficulty. We said if it's talking about Chayv, didn't Shmuel say that the Baal Chayv could collect the shvach? So why do you tell me that he has to pay for the expenses? Says Yomad, it depends which shvach. Kanobi in the Braises b'shvach is by the improvement as we continue to base hamagia lechesefayim, that it's ready to be put onto the shoulders. I mean, it's ready to be harvested. It just needs the property, so a little bit, but it's considered like full-fledged payers, and therefore the creditor cannot collect it without paying for the expenses because it's really not really considered part of the property anymore. Kan Shmuel that said that the creditor could collect the shvach is b'shvach she'ena megillah chesavayim. Is by the improvements that's just in the field itself. That he doesn't have to pay for. So that's not a contradiction. Says, but the problem is v'maisim b'chol yom. There's stories every single day when they have these judgments of seizing properties that come in front of Shmuel. And for Komakvi Shmuel would collect for the creditor all the improvements with the property, even for the improvements that are ready to be put onto their shoulders, as long as it still needs the property. But didn't you just tell me that's where, to resolve the contradiction, that's where the Brisa says, and Shmuel would agree that then the creditor can't just take the shvach, he has to pay for the expenses? Says Gemara, Lakasha, still not difficult. There's one more variable over here. The variable is the masig be shiur b'shivcha. One case is talking about where what's owed to the creditor is the amount of the property and the improvements. This that we learned in the Brisa, not like Shmuel, that the guy's got to pay for the expenses. The guy could collect the expenses of the creditor, because the masig be, the creditor is not owed by the seller the amount of the property and the improvements. It's eli kishir ara. He's only owed the value of what the property is. The yoivle. Then the creditor has to give back to the lekeach shivchei his improvements because he's not owed that amount, and then the masalikle, and then he could remove him. So Rashi just wonders, why do we say this teaching in the terminology of he collects the yitzia, the expenses from the Baal Chayv? Why doesn't it say that he takes according to the debt from the owner of the Baal Karka and the rest from the Baal Chayv? Because it's not so much the expenses, the guy's not owed the shvach, so whatever is the remaining should be collected from the Baal Chayv. So that says Rashi, because we wanted to tell you the chiddush itself, that when the expenses are more than the shvach, that he only gets the expenses according to how much the shvach is. That's why I mentioned it. But you're right, regarding the ratio, it's everything that he gets back, not just the expenses. But al kapanim, the Gemara says, wait, not so fast either, because this would make sense according to the one who says, which is machlekes and ksubas of tzadi avam and beis. That if the buyer has money to pay up the debt of his seller, to remove the creditor, says, look, you come in to collect because you have a lien, I'll pay up the debt of the seller. No, you can't remove the creditor from the land because the creditor has a lien. I said, I want this property. The guy owes me money, doesn't have, I'm taking the property. So Shape, okay, that makes sense, the answer that you gave, that you could say that when there is property with more than what's owed, with the improvements, that, okay, the creditor will pay out the buyer with money, forcibly removing the buyer, and the buyer can't say, wait, give me from the land according to how much I had made improvements, because the creditor could say, no, it's mine, I have a lien on it, and you came into this property without permission. So therefore, it makes sense that would be the explanation of the halacha of the brisa, that although Shmuel said the creditor gets to take it even with the improvements, that's only if that's according to how much was owed to him. If it's more than that, then no. Then the guy's got to pay the buyer, because he's saying, what do you mean paying? Paying because, yeah, he could remove him, he's got to pay him, and then he could take the shvach also. But Amandam, according to the one who holds kiyas leizuz lekech, when the buyer has money, he actually could remove the creditor. Wait a second. The name Alei, why can't the buyer tell the creditor, if I would have money, I would actually remove it from the whole property. Meaning, the buyer, according to that man Amar, says, look, you don't own the property, you just have a lien. I could pay you out, and I could keep it, I could pay up the guy's debt. So now that I don't have money, but at least give me a portion of the land, according to the measurement of how much I had made the improvements, because you owe me that, because you're not owed the amount of how much. You're owed $1,000, the land is worth $1,000. I made $300 worth of improvements. That $300, the price is clearly saying he's got to pay him up. But if he's got to pay me up, then let me just hold on to property, because if I had money in general, I'd be able to pay you up. The whole thing I'd remove you. So why is he paying him up and not letting him hold on to a piece of land? Says Gemara, no, I'll tell you why. This Bryce that we mentioned before, the borrower had made the creditor in apoitiki on this land. He said to him, you're only going to get paid from this. Oh, everyone agrees in such a case that if the buyer would have money, he would not be able to remove it. The point is, you got very strong rights in that field, and that's why the Bryce is just saying he's got to pay him up. But again, it doesn't contradict Shmuel. It says he doesn't have to pay him up because Shmuel is talking about where it's worth the amount of the shvach and the ara. But the Bryce is talking about where it's only the worth the ara for him what he's owed. And the shvach is extra, and therefore that's why he's got to compensate. Now the Gemara mentions a machlokes similar to what we said before regarding when you buy from a gazlan. What happens if hikrba? What happens if the buyer recognized by this property she'eina shaloi? He was able to tell it's not the seller's property, that he had stolen it, and still Lukach, he bought it from him. What's the halachic status of that money? Some Rab says mois yeshloi. This buyer gets his money back from the seller when the real owner comes and takes away the field, but shvach ein loi. But he doesn't get any compensation for the improvements. Meaning this in contrast to what we had mentioned before, when the guy doesn't know that this was a stolen field. We had machlokes Rabbi Shmuel there too. And actually, everyone held that you get the mo'is over there. The question was, you get the shvach or not? And here, everything is nechais darga, one step down. So here, the guy knew that it was stolen. So it's really a very different discussion. It's not like he didn't know, whatever. He knew it was stolen. So he'll get his money back, but the property was never acquired by him. There's no reason for him to get his shvach, so he's not going to get any improvements. Shmuel, he says, no, Shmuel says, no, the guy's not even going to get his money back. So they must have argument, but what are they disagreeing about? So Gemara explains. Rav held that Adam Yedeya Shakarka Ein Loi. A person knows that he's not getting a piece of property. He knows it's quote unquote stolen property. So why is he giving this guy the money? He's giving it to him as a deposit. Hold on to it. So says he, why don't you just tell him that you're giving him a deposit? Or you're making this whole spiel like, okay, I'll buy this property from you. Here, take my $10,000. Why are you doing that? Just say, here, could you watch my $10,000? Says, no, he thinks that the guy is not going to accept to watch his money. So therefore, he says, hey, look, I'll buy, like the famous joke, the guy wanted to go and park his car, right? He says, take collateral, you're not going to watch it for me. So that's okay. So here, let's do it this way, take it as collateral for the loan of that car. So he also thinks he's not going to accept. But really, that was his intention, like to keep it as a deposit until the guy comes and he says, hey, look, it's stolen, give my money back. Shmuel on the other end held that, a person knows that there's no property over here that's being sold. And he's concluding he's giving it as a gift. Says, really? He's gifting him the money? But why didn't he tell him, I want to give you a gift? He's embarrassed. He thought that like this is going to be embarrassing for him. He's not going to want to take a gift. He says, okay, guy koifin. Right. And? Oh, you're saying why would a cousin be, yes? I'm saying no one knows the Gazlan. I mean, he recognized that this is stolen property. But to take a matuna, a shayna yid, doesn't take matunas from people. He steals. That he could do. But he's not gonna have a gift. Says Gemara, okay, that's the machlekes regarding the guy gets his money back. Meaning, if it's a pekan, he gets his money back. If it's not a pekan, then he doesn't get it. It's a matan, he doesn't get his money back. So, but we already had this machlekes Rabbi Shmuel once before, which we had this mesech. This getting kedushin that the idma we learned. Hamakadosh is a chayse. Someone goes and he gets engaged to his sister. He says to his sister, they go to the mall, goes to the store, he takes a beautiful ring. He says, Haret Mukadeshes Li, he gives his sister a beautiful ring. What's Allah? Rav says, Mois Chaysin. He says, he's going to get back the ring. Shmuel says, no, Mois Matana. Says, the money is a gift. So what's the machlekes? Rav says, Mois Chaysin, you get back the money, meaning the kedushin goes back to him. Because everyone knows that kedushin does not take effect in the sister. So what's he doing? He wanted to hurry. He's going away for a year. He wanted her to watch something for him. So he says, it's a kedushin for you. But it's really just a pekan. So why didn't you just tell her, I want you to watch this ring for me? So I think she's not going to accept. She's not going to want to watch this for him. I don't want to take responsibility. But if it's a kedushin, so then okay, fine. It's mine. Shmuel says no. Mois matan. He says he's giving her a gift because everyone knows that kedushin doesn't take effect in his sister. So what are you doing? He's conclusively giving it to her as a gift. Says Say, hey, Shvester, I want to give you a gift. No, it's going to be embarrassed. She doesn't want to take gifts. She feels like you're giving you're having rechmanas. I don't want to be a pity case. All these types of things. It's a kedushin. But okay, so we had this machlokes once before. What's the point of saying it here again? So there's one difference, and that's where it goes both ways. Had we only said it regarding here, but Geneva, Bahag Kama Rav, that's what Rav says. You have a guy, a Goslin, who is quote unquote selling you a field, it's not his field. You say, oh yeah, I want to buy it. And what? You don't usually give gifts to a fremde, to a foreign guy. So maybe that's where Rav said that, it's a pekat, it's not a matana. But regarding someone's your sister, I would say he agrees to Shmuel that he's giving it as a matana and not as a pekat. And the same thing goes the other way around. We only said the machlokes regarding the sister. I would say maybe that's where Shmuel says the gift. But regarding here buying a field where the guy knows it's stolen, I would say he agrees to Rab that's not a matana, it's just a pekadon. If it's necessary, again, the difference is really basically regarding a stranger and regarding a sister. So you have to say it by both places to say they both hold to their opinions in both cases. But now the Gemara has the following question: Bein l'Rav dam pekadon, whether according to Rab that says it's a deposit. Bein l'Shmuel dam matana, whether according to Shmuel it says a gift. How does this even work? This guy, la'ara b'may this quote-unquote buyer, how is he coming down on this property? And how is he eating the payers? In other words, how could you say that the reason of Rav is because the guy made up his mind that he knew it's stolen, but he's just giving it to him to like a pakadon, to like this Gazan to watch his money. And the reason of Shmuel is because he's giving it as a matana, and if he had in mind for any one of these two things of Bekad Matana, how's he going into the property to work on it and to eat its pears? But he knows it's stolen. Obviously, he thought that the sale is valid. He wasn't proficient in Torah law. He thought that maybe you're allowed to go ahead and, if I'll pay for it, whatever. So it must be that the Machlekes Rabbi Shmuel is for some other reason. So, because there was how's the guy able to go work the field? So no, it's not difficult. Savar, he thought, meaning he rationalized, look, I am going to go work the land. I'm going to go down to the land. I'll work on it and I'll eat whatever the produce is. Just like the Gazan would have done it. Meaning, I'm not doing anything different. This guy's stole it. I know it's stolen. And of course I know I'm not buying it. I'm just giving him a matana or I'm giving him a pekad. So why is he working the field? He says, look, because anyway, this guy would do it. I'll do the same thing. When the real owner comes, let it be money, and I know it's not a sale. Now, what does it mean that let the money he gave be money? According to Rav, it says bekadon. In other words, according to Rav, we're going to explain when he says let it be money, it's going to be bekadon. Shmuel the matana. According to Shmuel, that says a gift. We explained that this day says it should be money. It'll be matana, meaning he knows it's not a sale. It's just money. What does that mean? Either bekadon or matana, but. Therefore, he rationalized that what's the difference if he works it or I work it, and therefore that's why he's going onto the field. Now, Amar Rava says, concluding what we said from previous dafim, Hilchas halacha is regarding the first machlekes we had in Daf Yudal and Beis. Halacha is like Rav that we said that when you are buy from a Goslin. Not only do you get your money back, you get also your improvements back. And even though he didn't specify the improvements, because we don't hold like Shmuel that says that you have to consult regarding the shvach, you always get it back. And regarding this machlekes that we just discussed, of hikabash initial level akha, if let's say we recognize that it's not his and he buys it, Mois Yeshloi, which again is like Rav, he gets his money back. It's just Shvachin, like, it doesn't get, of course, not getting it because he knows it's a Gazlan, he knows it's someone else's field, but he gets the money back because it's a Pekadin, not a Matana. Another Psak Halach is a Chrayas. When it comes to insurance, Toy Seifahu, if it's not mentioned in the document, it's a scribal error. The guy will have insurance. And that's Bein Bishtar Halva. That's whether regarding a loan document, like we had in the Rabban of our Mishnah. And what's being added on is Bein Bishtar Mekach Memka, which meaning we're not like Shmuel that we said on Daf Yadal and Maralev, that says that by shibud for a lien you have to consult. No, not only by a loan, but even by sale, because we had differentiated. We said, a sale person would take without insurance versus a loan. No, even over there, we say it's toy cipher. Now, the Gemara has an interesting following question. What happens if Chazar, what happens if the Gazlan goes back? Remember, this guy stole the field and sold it to someone else. What happens if he goes back, after he sold it to a buyer, he goes back and buys it from the real owner that he has stolen from? Now, what's the halacha to be in place of the owners? Is it like as if someone else bought it and then he could go collect from the guy he sold it to? Just like the real owners could do that, and now he is someone else who bought it from the owner and therefore could collect it, or not? So he said to him, Rav answered, he says, no, he can't take it away from the guy he sold it to. When he sold it to his buyer, what did the first guy, the Gazlan, sell to the second guy, to the buyer? Any rights that are going to come to him. So when he buys it, he only bought it so that it should be substantiated in the hand of the guy who bought it from him in the first place. So the Gemara says, then my timer. Then what if he's not getting to keep it, then why did he go back and buy it from the real owner? So the Gemara has two different approaches. Mazutra Amma, he says, the Nichale, the Leinikarya Gazlana. He preferred that he's not going to be called a Gazlan. He doesn't want to be embarrassed by this buyer, that when the victim is going to take it away from him, he's going to say, you're Gazlan. This was never your property. So therefore he went, for an extrinsic reason, he went to go ahead and make sure that the sale will remain by the guy he sold it to. Rav Ashi says a slightly different reason. It's more like really an intrinsic reason, like more about values. He wants to be remain a faithful person and get this guy to hold on to what he really bought from him. So what's the difference between them? The difference between them is the mislokeach. If the buyer died after the Gazlan bought it from the real owners, and now the Gazlan is coming to take it away from the guy's sons. So, as the Gemara explains, Mandam, according to one who says that he's not really trying to substantiate his sale, it's just that he doesn't want to be called a Gazlan. The guy doesn't really care. The guy's into image. The guy's into status. He cares. He doesn't want to be called a Gazlan. Oh, so it's again to the top of Tesvav Menalev, a mislay. The buyer died. Who's going to shame him anymore? So therefore, this guy didn't have in mind only to keep it by the lekech when the guy's alive, not after he's dead. So therefore, then it wouldn't go to the buyer's. The Gazlan would be able to get it back because that was not his purpose. It just didn't want anyone to shame him, and no one shaming him. But according to one says no, he wants to live up to his values of being faithful. So with the children also he wants to be faithful. Like, it's obviously unethical what he did, and he wants to substantiate, and therefore he would not be able to collect it. It would have to stay by. He was trying to do it to keep it by the Lekech's family. The Gemara doesn't like this difference because even according to the one that he doesn't want to be shamed, he's just more cared about his image. The children Lekech, even though Lekech is dead, the children are going to say you're a Gazlan. So how does that help? So when I read that, the Gemara says what the difference between them is the mis-Gazlan. That actually the Gazlan died after he bought it from the real owners, and now his sons, since he bought it now, want to collect it from his Lekech. So Mandam and Nichel in the Shloilikura Gazlan, according to one that says that the guy prefers, he just doesn't want to be called a Gazlan. Misli, he's dead. And he only had in mind to keep it by the substantiate of the sale when he's alive, that he didn't want to be shamed. Now that he's dead, he doesn't care. He's 6 feet under. But Mandam and Nichel but according to one that said he wanted to live according to his value system, with his faithfulness, so Hachanami, so heroes, even though he's already dead, he still wants to, leave with his ethics and his morals cleared, even after he's dead. So therefore, that would be the difference when the Gazlan is dead. So it's still, the Gemara still asks, it says even the image conscious guy, he says that he knows they're going to shame him even after he's dead. He's concerned that they're going to call his children the children of the Gazlan. So the Gemara shows that, the image guy is worried about even after he's dead also. So that shouldn't be a difference between them. So like Benai rather says the difference between them is the Yava b'matana. He gave it as a gift. According to the one that says that he wants to remain with his faithfulness. He wants to be faithful, like you gave me a gift that wasn't your field. So the guy's like, yeah, I don't want the guy to be like, it is unethical what it did. So he's going to go back and buy it from the guy. It was to give it to the guy who had received it from him. But according to one that says he just doesn't want to be called a gazlan, what did I steal from you? I didn't steal anything from you. And therefore, that wouldn't be a concern about image. And therefore, that would be the case, that would be the difference between these two different pshatim of when the guy buys it back from the original owner. What's the reason to say that if it would be that the gazlan would be able to keep it, or would it have to be by the likach? Any time.